Okay, this is Joe Leigh here for Seconds Out. Back with Dan Hardy, one of the MMA gurus. I introduce you with a different name every time, but we've obviously got a lot to speak about boxing MMA wise. Non-stop recently, a good start to the year for both fight sports. How are you, Dan? Good to see you again.
Yeah, good, mate. Good, really good. Few days away from UFC London, busy because my wife's on the card and looking forward to it.
Yeah, early prelim. She's got a good fight on her hands. I'm looking forward to that one. And we'll start off with PFL before we go over to the big UFC 286 this weekend. And you've got a new role. Would you like to introduce that role to people watching and describe what that is?
Sure. So I am head of fighter operations for Europe, director of fighter operations for Europe. So my job will be scouting talent, bringing the talent on board into the PFL roster, making sure they've got everything they need, they feel supported, answering any questions, connecting them with, all the necessary people that they'll need to help and guide and cover their career as they grow on the PFL roster, and also doing analysis as well. I'll still be working alongside the broadcast team doing that.
Interesting. So we spoke last time and we mentioned how the PFL Europe works, how regular PFL season works as well. But how would you describe the perfect career for a PFL fighter, say Simeon Pal, not going over to the UFC or Bellator, staying in the PFL? How does a perfect PFL fighter's career pan out?
Well, I mean, if we look at Simeon specifically, obviously he's in the light heavyweight division, so there's a lot of eyes on that division already. He, of course, is undefeated, so he's growing very quickly. But he's in the European season this season. So if he wins this, then he's going to transition to the global league. So you've got to think. I mean, it'll be three fights this year. If he wins those three fights, he'll be the European champion at light heavyweight, the first one. He'll get his six-figure prize, which will go a long way to supporting his training camps when he moves over to the PFL global roster. And then it will be a case of fighting in the regular season for a place in the championships. And once he's in the championships, once he's one of the top fighters to be selected, then he'll be, within striking distance of the $1 million prize and the global championship, PFL world champion. And then, I mean, if he follows Kayla Harrison's footsteps, he would go back and win it a second time, and then maybe attempt a third. But there's also, the pay-per-view shows that PFL are going to be doing. So someone like Simeon in, say, 3 years' time, I mean, that would take him 3 years if he went through the European season and then won the global league twice. That would be 3 years of consistent competition. So another, what you're looking at, a minimum of 9 fights, probably more though. He would have beaten some big names and some tough opponents along the way and grown his own name. If he's undefeated still, of course, that would be a huge storyline. A lot of people would be interested in him as well because of that. But he's young. I expect him to meet some rough challenges along the way, and I think people will be interested in his journey. And then 3 years down the line, if he wins the European League and the global championship twice, the world championship, then we've got the option of putting him into pay-per-view fights. And then it's a case of seeing who's around and who would be good matchups for him. And I think with the pay-per-view offering from PFL, with the 50-50 split, there'll be a lot of fighters thinking about which route do I take? I could take this way, which is the traditional work your way through the UFC roster or the one championship roster or whatever other organization you sign with. Or you can get locked into this league format, and then your career's laid out for you for as long as you can keep winning. And then the pay-per-view at the end of the road shows you that once you've achieved all there is to achieve in the regular league season and championship, then you've got big fights at the end with other big opponents, and half of the money's on the table for the fighters.
Yeah, and obviously Simeon out just over 10 days' time, 25th of March in Newcastle. What do you think the main selling point is for the PFL, Dan?
I think it's the accessibility for a start. I mean, you look at ticket prices compared to other organizations, you have to be saving money for weeks and months for tickets for some organizations. Whereas PFL, I think the cheapest ticket is going to be £25. It's a good opportunity for people to come and be in an arena watching live fights, especially because a lot of people watch MMA on TV and not nearly as many. I mean, we're at shows all the time. We're spoiled. but there are a lot of people that don't ever get the opportunity to go to shows, especially in the north of England. You've got to think most of the shows are very London centric. And, you know, since Paddy and Molly have moved on, we're not getting Cage Warriors in the north anymore. So
Yeah.
we're a little bit stuck if you're an MMA fan in the north of England. Newcastle's accessible to a lot of people that wouldn't make the journey all the way down to London. So I think that's a big selling point initially for this first fight, for this first event. Second of all, you know, it's European talent, so you can find fighters from your you know, your local country that you can follow. If you're, you know, if you're English or Scottish, there's fights on the card for you. Welsh fighters coming through the roster. Then all the way across Europe, we've got talent from all regions of Europe. It's a, you know, it's a very exciting thing for Europe to have a very European focused event, and then to know that they can move on to a global scene as well. If I'm a young kid and I'm growing up in Newcastle and I love martial arts and I can go and watch this, I'll get the opportunity to watch, you know, Dakota Ditchever and Simeon Pal potentially, you know, win this first fight on the European season and then move on to much bigger things. And you know, it's exciting because this is a journey you can follow quite easily, because you know when they're going to be fighting if they keep winning, and you know who's in their bracket as well. So lots of good selling points for it. But the main thing really, you know, come and watch it live. Watch it on DAZN. Watch it live on in the Newcastle arena. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, there aren't as many as, say, boxing. Let's use that as an example. You have boxing shows week after week, and they're relatively big shows. MMA, you don't always get that. UFC comes once a year. Cage Warriors not so often, and yeah, not so often in the north either. That's even rarer thing. But MMA in the UK, big shows like this don't come around often. So I think it's going to be a really exciting card and lots at stake as well, with a good main and co-main event. I want to move on to kind of the Jake Paul side of things. Obviously, he's with the PFL. Who knows what's going to happen with that? But I want to get your take on the fight with Tommy. Everyone's opinion was that, like, they were kind of surprised with how the fight panned out because they're both novices. But we expected that. That's what Tommy is, and that's what Jake is. Were you surprised with how the fight went? And do you think it'd be different in a rematch?
No, I wasn't particularly surprised, to be honest. I mean, I think that they're both at a very competitive level with one another, and I think that there was a lot more made out of the fact that Tommy Fury was a boxer and Jake Paul wasn't, and I don't really think that was a fair characterization of them, because you know, you look at the guys that Tommy Fury fought in his first few fights, and they weren't. I mean, they weren't really much boxers themselves. You know, there were a lot of journeymen, a lot of really bad records. Like Jake Paul was in the limelight straight away. Tommy Fury was fighting on smaller cards against guys that we knew he was going to beat. So there was a lot of pressure in the earlier career of Jake Paul, even though he wasn't fighting boxers per se. I mean, of course, you know, Ben Askren was not going to put up much of a fight, but Tyron Woodley's a puncher. You know, we've seen him put people on the canvas over and over again as a UFC champion. You can't underestimate the kind of pressure that Jake Paul was putting himself under, having not had a combat sports background. It wasn't like he had a bunch of amateur fights to prepare him for it. He was stepping in against people that were, you know, well-accustomed competitors, and he had a lot to lose. You know, he could quite easily have been embarrassed, but he took it all in his stride. And I don't think that the Tommy Fury fight has really affected him at all. I mean, anybody that's following Jake has been following him because they like him, not because he's a boxer. You know, he's not got a boxing fan base, so they're just interested in his journey. There was a lot more pressure on Tommy, as you know, as we spoke about. I feel like there was enough pressure coming from his own camp to make it difficult for him to win. So Tommy had to, you know, put on the best performance that he could. And I think, you know, like, I don't think we can expect too much from either of them. You know, they're not world beaters, either of them. Neither of them are going to go on and become world champions, I don't think. And if they do, fair play to them, and I'll be surprised. But as of right now, Tommy Fury's kind of moved into the more influencer YouTuber style of, area of boxing than actual legitimate boxing. So that he's blurring the lines himself. I think we'll get a rematch. I think, you know, we'll see Tommy Fury fight, you know, KSI or whatever else is going to happen in that whole kind of genre. And I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all. And, you know, Jake Paul's taken his defeat in his stride, as I said, and he took it a lot better than some other professionals that I've seen. So, you know, fair play to him. And I think him partnering with the PFL is massive. I think he's going to draw a lot more attention to the PFL. I think he's going to open people's eyes to the possibility of there being a different avenue other than the UFC. And And I think, with the pay-per-view shows, who better to help matchmake those shows than someone that can stir a massive amount of interest around a fight? You can, like, Jake Paul can hype his own fights, but you don't think he can hype an Ngannou fight? It'd be ridiculous.
Yeah, I want to stick to the Fury side, and move to Tyson just very, very quickly. I know it's refreshing speaking to an MMA person because we don't always have to talk about fights not happening. Although you mentioned Ngannou and Ngannou Jones hasn't happened, but Tyson Fury versus Usyk over the last couple of days have been going back and forth, and it's ridiculous. It's not nice to see as a boxing fan, but do you think that fight's ever going to happen? Just briefly from your side of things.
Yeah, I think it will happen. I think it will happen. I think, there's enough interest around it. There's been enough conversation around it. They just have to let it marinate for a while and gather some interest. And the more back and forth between the two camps, the more interest there's going to be. I like both of them. I think Usyk's an absolute technician. Fury's a very, very tough test and a very interesting boxer, but he has the size difference, which I feel is going to be the real big narrative going in, and maybe the one thing that would turn people off watching it because they might not feel it's as competitive as it actually will be.
Yeah. Okay. UFC this weekend. Let's start with Veronica then, of course, as she kicks off the card, I believe. Is that correct? Do we know this yet? It keeps changing on Fight Pass for me when I check, but does she kick off the fight card?
We don't know. We won't know until we get their fight week. They've not confirmed the card yet, but it does look like she'll be the first fight. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it is.
Are you excited for that?
I am so excited, and she's so ready as well. We had a really good training session this morning. We had the last hard conditioning session yesterday. She smashed it. We're in great shape. We're right close to the weight already. It's not going to be a tough week of weight cutting. I'm excited.
With yourself and fighting, where are we at the moment? It was close, it was far. What about 2023?
Who knows, my friend? Who knows? I've got so many things on my table at the moment to be dealing with. Veronica takes priority because she's competing. And after that, of course, we've got PFL Newcastle, which will get my full attention. And after that, we'll just be rolling. It'll be the PFL season. So there's going to be plenty keeping me busy. I'm still training. I'll always be training. I'll always be in the gym. But we'll see what offers come to me. But at the moment, there's nothing on the table.
Okay, just two more then from me. Leon versus Kamaru 3. I believe Usman's training in Kent, so not far from where I am right now. I'm going to have to go visit him. I didn't realise this until about 2 hours ago, so I'm quite excited. He's in the UK, he's ready. And is he going to pull it off? Third fight, a trilogy. We don't often see trilogies in the UFC, but this one's a huge one.
It is a big one, especially because it's Leon defending his belt for the first time, on home turf. And it's always a difficult thing to do. Remember when Bisping fought Henderson and, people were still on the fence about that decision. It's always a tough thing to do to have all those expectations on your shoulders and carry a card. And to know that Usman's such a tough competitor who took 3 of the rounds in their last fight, Usman is the more winning fighter out of the 2 of them. But then the thing that wins Leon fights is his ability to sharpshoot and pick people off. And as we saw in the last fight, he did that perfectly. Now, we'll lightning strike twice. Usman's going to do everything he can to keep that distance closed and not allow it. But this is where we get to see if Leon's evolved, if his takedown defense or offense or sub-offense has improved, or, I think we'll see a few more elbows and knees in this one as well. And plus, it's not quite as high above sea level. So I think that the gas tank won't be quite as affected.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you make. Okay, we'll end it off with 25th then. Simeon, Dakota, the main 2. A lot of UK talent as well, as you've mentioned. But what are they going to be expected to do over the next year, and how do you think they'll perform on the 25th, both of those 2 guys?
Well, it's hard to look past these 2 fights that they've got, to be honest. They are very tough. Muhammad Hamid's training with Masasi and with René Derrida. He's got great people around him, striking and grappling. If you can take what Masasi and Derrida have got and combine them in some way, especially with Amin's abilities already, I feel like he's a very, very stiff test for Simeon. Now, of course, Simeon's gonna feel confident that he's going to be able to move in and out of striking range comfortably and land when he wants. But he might find himself pushed in this fight more than he has done before. So, I can't take my eyes off the fact that he's got this test in front of him, and Amin is a very, very stiff test for him for sure. And we also don't know which way he's going to take the fight. He could push a striking match or decide to take it to the floor, and that's kind of left to be seen until the first round. And then with Dakota, same situation again, to be honest. Like, she's got a new opponent, 2 weeks out from the fight. Malin Hermansson's a very, very good boxer, a Swedish national champion, very good hands. Her last win was a rear naked choke as well, after her opponent just couldn't take any more hands. Again, a very, very tough test for Dakota. She's got to deal with a very competent, confident striker who's also got the opportunity, option to take the fight to the floor. That's going to be the biggest question is, where does Hermansson want to take this fight? Does she want to grapple with Dakota because it's the safest thing? Or does she want to prove her boxing skills? And, she's hands down, head movement, very confident. But, if I'm Dakota, I'm thinking head kicks all day with her hands down like that.
Yeah, well, good luck to Team Hardy, UFC 286, and see you in Newcastle.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.